Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm so grateful to be here.
Amazing. So when we talked before, we talked about a lot of different things, but the first one, and often the focus in Hollywood, was green production focuses on production.
Yeah.
So what are some of the big steps that have been taken in that area in recent years?
Well, hi everyone. I don't know how many of you watches films and television, but I assume it's probably the majority of you. Probably in the recent years you have noticed that we have way more content. It's hard to keep up with all the amazing shows out there, and now we have like Netflix and HBO and Amazon Prime and every single possible streamer out there. And so that has an increasing environmental cost. I think before answering what steps have we taken in the recent years, it's very important to contextualize that year after year, our carbon footprint in the entertainment and culture sector is growing exponentially. If you look at the chart of 2009 and 2019, it has nothing to do with each other. And so as a response, the studios and the production companies, they know that they need to include sustainability officers in their production teams, and a lot of the studios now have sustainability chief officers and green consulting agencies that they work with to make sure that their productions are less harmful to the environment. But we still are very far away from where we need to be. There is now, I included here a picture of different production sets, no? Because there is a very uneven distribution of resources right now. If you compare how can you greenify your production in Canada or in the UK or in the US versus if you want to shoot a film in anywhere in India or maybe in the African region, there is not the same resources in place. And so this slide here actually shows you from the Albert, which is BAFTA's sustainability consortium, they did a study looking into the emissions of a tentpole film, Indiana Jones, or Star Wars, or any of those big movies that we see at the box office. And one of those movies equals to 13 trips to the moon. So every time that we see Elon Musk launch one of those SpaceX rockets, add up 13 of them, and you have one big Hollywood movie. And as you all know, we don't just have one Hollywood big movie. We have a lot of big Hollywood movies, and increasingly more, because the industry knows that that's how they can make the most money. So that poses the question of how do we bring that number down? And the reality is that fossil fuels, transportation are the biggest contributors to the industry. So in recent years, we've taken a lot of steps to create new calculators, new assessment methods, but we now have to figure out what is the infrastructure that we need in place in order to bring those emissions down.
Amazing. Now, if we're going to empower others outside of the industry, it's not just the production that we need to change, is it? We need to change the story that's being told. So what are some of the on-screen things, what the on-screen areas that we can work on?
Yeah, I mean, on-screen starts very early in the process when a writer or a producer or a director, pip, a light bulb happens on the top of their head. And then all the way until the distribution process when we show that movie to the audiences, which is the reason why we're making content in the first place, is to show it to people and connect with the stories we want to tell. So there is a lot of phases, and a lot of times we think that green production only happens in set, and oh, let's just take all the water bottles from set, and that's it, we did it, check the box. And that's not the case. A lot of times, consideration that will play a big role in the production are decided during the development process. And if you write a film that has you and I in the middle of the car having a conversation and we're just driving in the middle of traffic, well, that's not, there is nothing that we can do about it at the green production. But if the writer put that situation in a public bus or in the metro, you may even have more creative choices available to you, because I hate when I watch a movie and the person is not watching at the wheel because they're like, oh, I'm talking to you, and obviously I'm not looking at the road. So it's very obvious that we could be doing a lot more, and I work with Good Energy, which is a nonprofit, the first nonprofit to create a playbook for climate storytelling, so that the screenwriters have resources available to them to include more climate on screen. And they did a study with USC, Norman Lear, which was astonishing, because we look at 37,000 plus scripts in television and television and film, and we realized that only less than 2.8% of them had any climate keywords mentioned, and that include climate, obviously, carbon footprint, drought, hurricane. And the curious thing is that when you look at all these different mentions, less than 0.6% of them are actually related to climate change. And even in the case of extreme weather events, for example, only 10% of the extreme weather events that we see in our screens mention climate change or make a direct connection to the environmental crisis we live in. So that has to change, and it can change in a lot of ways. It can change by including simple placements on the screen. I don't know if you have seen A Quiet Place, which is a movie that if you make any noise, they kill you. So I could not live in that world, clearly. But they have solar panels on the rooftop because that's a quiet source of energy, and they need to use that in order not to be killed. Not because they want to be environmentally friendly, no, but because it makes sense in the world that they are in. And the same can happen with little mentions, with the climate world building, and obviously the characters, because there is a lot of people here who are innovators, climate activists, solutionists, and you also have stories and deserve to have on-screen presence as well, no?
I think for me, the worst one is the typical American movie when the teenager comes downstairs and grabs a piece of toast and walk out the door, and you can see all of that food left on the table, and just think, my mum would never let me do that.
Yeah.
So the next one, how can Hollywood be more representative of climate-affected people?
Well, that's a big question, because I think that Hollywood has a lot of representation issues, not just in climate, but all across the board. We probably all have seen a movie and seen someone that is supposed to be similar to ourselves, and then realize, wait, that's not true. You know, that doesn't happen to me. Even from a love perspective, you know, like I realized that my understanding of romantic relationships was truly built upon Disney movies. And, oh, a prince is gonna come and save me, and that hasn't happened yet, no? And so we need to understand that the narrative that we consume impact the decisions we make and our behavioral change, and we are not seeing narrative that accurately reflect the climate crisis we are in. And I know a lot of people that they will know what to do in a zombie apocalypse because there is so many movies about apocalypse of zombies, you know, and unfortunately we're not creating compelling, non-dystopian, optimistic narrative that give people tools and hope to deal with the crisis we are in. No? And I think that one of the biggest important aspects to do that in storytelling is to remember that, just as this slide here tells us that climate can be present in a myriad of forms, it can also be present in a myriad of genres. It's very important to include climate storytelling in comedy, in horror, in sci-fi, in drama comedy, in family drama. One of my favorite movies last year was Costa Brava, Lebanon, which is on Netflix, and I recommend all of you to see it. And it's about a family drama that features a family that live in Beirut, and they have to move to the mountains because there is way too much trash in the city. And when they moved to the mountains, they built an illegal trash site right next to the green area where they moved to. And it's kind of like a metaphor of like, well, they thought they were gonna get away from the trash, and now they're stuck there again. And it's not a movie about trash. It's a movie about a family that is overcoming those issues, but you see it all the time, how that is impacting them and the representation of those issues in their characters.
So let's look at how things are changing, how we're moving forward. So the Hollywood Climate Summit sounds pretty awesome. What is it?
It's an amazing event, and all of you here are invited to attend. It's going to be hosted next month, June 21st to June 24th in Los Angeles. This is our fourth annual edition of the summit. We started in 2020, which is a fantastic year to start anything, of course. But it was actually because we were going to do it in person, and then obviously the pandemic prevented that. But what was supposed to be an event for 300 people ended up being an event for 15,000 people all over the world. And that really speaks to the fact that Hollywood is an international brand, whether we like it or not, and that it has a lot of power to bring global audiences together and push for issues that are planetary issues, like precisely the climate crisis. No? And so these are some of the pictures of previous events at the Hollywood Climate Summit. We are going to be hosting it at the Academy of Motion Pictures, the Oscars this year. And this is pretty significant because we want the Hollywood Climate Summit to stay. I'm the impact officer and co-founder of the summit. And so one of my jobs is to create the impact reports and to look at the partnerships and see what are the tangible outcomes that we see year round. And one of the tangible outcomes is having more than 240 partners from over 67 countries who are now collaborating all year round, making sure that the sustainable production process starts during storytelling in the development process and then carries through all the way to the audience distribution and engagement. And so we hope that the summit will be a space just like ChangeNOW for the entertainment and climate community to come together and find those solutions.
I'm crossing my fingers, that's for sure.
And by the way, this is the link to get tickets. If anyone wants to get tickets, they can find them at HCS Earth 2023 tickets. Online tickets are completely free. And it will be all live streamed, and there will be Jane Fonda is attending and speaking about fossil fuels in the industry, the Daniels, which are the directors of Everything Everywhere All at Once, and a lot of amazing other speakers that I'm sure you will be interested in.
I can't wait. So how can we keep people and production companies accountable?
Well, I'm not going to make a lot of friends by answering this question, especially since the studios also sponsor the summit. But the reality is that there is no accountability without transparency. And that is the main goal of the Entertainment and Culture for Climate Action initiative that I'm in the convening team with the UNCCC. If anyone is more interested or would like to join the initiative, they can find out more at eka.earth. And basically, to answer your question of accountability, the big issue that we have right now is that there is no regulation or policy requiring companies to disclose their carbon emissions inventory. So right now, it's very easy for a studio to say we are net zero by 2022 and publish a report on their website claiming that that's what they're doing, but there will be no accountability whatsoever for them actually having to prove that those emissions are true, meaning that that leads to greenwashing, lying, and manipulation of the facts, no? Which is obviously something that in Hollywood they know how to do very well because they are storytellers. So we have to increase transparency, and the UNCCC is a neutral institution that we hope can ask the companies to do that. I think we're not asking for that much. If you're saying that you're going to be net zero by 2030, great, prove it.
Yeah.
And if you can't, that's not so great, but at least be honest about it so that you can receive the mutual aid support that you need to accomplish those objectives. Because I think that something that we have seen with the Entertainment Climate Accord is that not everyone can reach the same goals at the same time. And that leads me back to the global equity piece at the beginning. This accord is not just for Hollywood, Canada, and the UK. Right now, there is a lot of data that shows that there is way more content production happening in Bollywood and Nollywood, India and Nigeria than in the United States. And as you probably have noticed, in Netflix or other streamers, we have increasingly more international content because that is actually part of their business strategy, is to find subscribers outside of the places where they already have their biggest subscriber pools. So we do need different pathways adapted to different stakeholders and different regions, but we need transparency in ensuring that each commitment that each signatory is putting out there can be backed up with facts and data. And then that data will actually give us the big picture of the sector, which right now we don't have. Because before I showed Albert's pie chart of carbon pollution for films and television, but that's just the UK, in where they are doing it with more sustainability resources. If you look at a big Bollywood production, where maybe they don't have as much of the same infrastructure, that might be a different total, and we don't have anywhere where we are aggregating that data like it's happening in fashion, in sports, or in other sectors.
Amazing. So now we've got a minute and a half for a very big question.
Yeah.
What is the end goal, and how are you going to get so many, like such a diverse range of people to work together in this industry?
But it's the same thing, no? It's like we cannot expect everyone to do the same, and so the Accord has a framework, a hybrid format, which means that we are going to be asking everyone to be doing, to be signing an acknowledgement of the direction that the industry needs to be going to, which will include various goals such as decarbonization in alignment with the Paris Agreement, storytelling and more climate stories on screen, as well as a protection of the biodiversity and the natural resources where we film at. You will be surprised if you knew all the damage that has happened in natural habitats because of films. It's actually astonishing. But this slide here shows how the entertainment climate action is interconnected depending on the various stakeholders. If I'm a producer, which I'm a producer, by the way, I will need to request a permit to film a movie. And if that film commission here in Paris tells me, I will not give you the permit unless you follow those guidelines, well, that is accountability. That is a check and balance that the film commission as an institution can put in front of producers, such as, for example, film funding. We have a lot of funding that comes from governments, and governments don't have the understanding of what should be the criteria to establish if a film is if a production is sustainable enough or not. So we're hoping that this accord with the first part is going to provide acknowledgement for the entire industry, and then the second part will be individual commitments that will vary depending on what stakeholder type and what region are they based in. And this accord will be launched hopefully this fall. And then at COP28 this year, we're hoping to have the first ever entertainment and culture pavilion in the Blue Zone, where we can bring together the stakeholders, the industry, and keep providing resources and information, as well as collaborating with policymakers, because we know that although the stakeholders cannot be doing things on their own will, we also have to create checks and balances from a policy standpoint too.
Well, amazing, and I wish you all the luck in the world. Thank you so much for joining us. Rubin.
Thank you.